So, you're sharpening your own Japanese kitchen knives, but maybe you're struggling to get them as pretty as they are out of box. I'm going to show you my personal tips and tricks to get these stunning finishes on your Japanese kitchen knives back. Hi, I'm Naoto, the lead sharpener at Knifewear. I spend a lot of time in my workshop experimenting with different steels, stones, and techniques to help our staff and customers understand the secrets of professional knife sharpening. If you want to see more, catch my monthly live stream, Naoto's Nerdy Power Hour, for more techniques. Today, I'll be showing you how to achieve 3 different finishes on your knives: Migaki, Kasumi, and mirror finish. We're not focusing on the edge of our knives today, rather the primary bevel of that knife, where it tapers it down to the edge. When you sharpen your Japanese knives, you want to thin this area to keep your knife cutting beautifully. Otherwise, they get too thick. This will change the look of your knife, but with the right technique and a little time, you can bring them back to the gorgeous finish, and here's how. The thinning process takes place on the rough stones, like 220 grit. That leaves the deeper scratches on the bevel. If you'd like to learn more about the thinning process, check out the video I did a while back. The first step is to polish out these deeper scratches out with using a little bit more smoother stones. I have this Naniwa Hibiki 1000 grit stone. This does 2 things. One, to smooth out the deeper scratches that I've created with the 220 grit. Also, this stone will evens it out a bit of a bumpy spots on the bevel if there is any. Before we go on that, I would like to show you a little bit of trick for the handle. I deal with most of the milling sharpenings, and when I sharpen knives, my hand gets pretty dirty. When I grab the handle with the dirty hands, the handle can get dirty like this. So in order to prevent that from happening, this is the trick that I use. I take the piece of plastic wrap. Any plastic wrap will work. This comes handy. Warming up your lunch, we have them in our office. Just take a piece of wrap the handle quite tight, pull the ends. To finish, I take basic masking tape, then it's good to start. This is Naniwa Hibiki 1000 grit stone. This is one of the hardest stone series that they have created, which means they will keep its surface flat for long. Therefore, it's really easy to test how even the bevel is. Before I grab this stone, I trued it pretty nicely. The purpose of this first step is really to see if there is any bumps, humps, or remove all the scratches that I've created with 220 grit stone. In order to do that, flatness of the surface is very important. I use Atoma diamond plate core stone to make sure this is as flat as it gets. Then you put the flat on the bevel and work few light strokes and check your work. You can see here at the heel, this part has a slight different light reflection. So that means this part needs to be ground down a little bit more to make it flat. This foundation work is very important whether you're making Migaki finish, Kasumi finish, or mirror polish, but particularly important if you're trying to make the bevel like a mirror polish. After I observe that little low spot, I try to focus on that spot to even it out. By the way, if you don't have this particular stone, you can use something harder. For example, Naniwa Professional 1000 grit or even 2000 grit to do this job. I'm gonna check again. There's still a few lower spots right at the heel, as well as tiny bit of different light reflection at the tip. So I'm going to work a little bit more to get that part down. The reason why, especially when you're trying to make a mirror polish on the bevel, reason why it's very important to have this foundation work or make this bevel flat is that once you attain the mirror polish, what happens if the bevel is not flat? You see yourself on the bevel and the image will distort. It shouldn't matter for the edge, but it would be nice that if the image is as clear as or as pretty as yourself. So I am focusing on the part that was a little bit over by placing my finger. Okay, just give me 1 second. True your stone as needed as well. I do check my work as often as possible so that I know where and which part of the knife is actually touching on the stone. It looks pretty good. I achieved pretty nice even flat bevel all along. There's not much different light reflection here or there. So the first finish is the Migaki finish. This is the simplest finish that you could achieve. In order to attain the simple Migaki finish, you can take a sandpaper from this point on. I usually use the sandpaper roughly around 800 grit to 1200 grit. Today I'm going to use this 800 grit sandpaper. What you want to use is the waterproof sandpaper. That means you can just use it under water. Just put the water. You can submerge a piece of sandpaper into the water a little bit to have the moisten a little bit first. But what you do is moisten your knife with the water, have the piece of sandpaper. Be careful when you're working with the sandpaper on the blade. I will always put that on something flat, whether a sharpening stone. You could use them on the cutting board, which you have to wash your cutting board quite nicely afterwards. But something flat and something stable is very important. Very light pressure. I just slide my sandpaper long way. It is safer. I mean, you don't want to do this along the bevel of the knife here. So this blends two different type of steel together. Most Japanese knives are made with two different type of steel, hard and soft steel. When I finish at this 1000 grit, you could see that little boundary between hard steel and soft steel. Now it's harder to see. So now you don't see as much of the boundary between hard steel and soft steel. This is easy finish to attain. You get very nice smooth bevel so that it has less friction when you're cutting into food as well. This would be a great finish if you're a beginner at polishing your knife. So now I'm going to show you how to create a basic technique of how to do so-called Kasumi finish. Kasumi means a mist in Japanese, and basically what you would do is to fogs up the softer steel and usually have the very nice high shine along the edge of the harder steel. This is great technique to advance your skills when you want to learn more about the Japanese knife sharpening. So I'm going to work on the other side of this knife. Do the same thing by adding the pressure and check the knife and see if there is high, low spots. Found a few low spots here and here. So I'm going to work a little bit more. Reason why you want to use a harder stone for this evening out process is that the harder stones are much less forgiving and shows the higher spots and lower spots much more prominently. Therefore, it's great to check your condition of your knife. If you want to be master at making the Kasumi finish, I would urge you to use both hands or switch your hands when you're sharpening. It is awkward and hard for the beginning, but the end results will be much nicer. And if you're just working on the bevel, it's not that hard. All you have to do is lay it flat, apply the pressure, then move your finger like this. Sorry, move your arm like this. Now I've sharpened and flattened out all the low spots. I'm going to move on to the next stone, which is Knifewear 1000. So this is Knifewear 1000 grit stone, relatively soft stone, and does the slightly different job from the Naniwa Hibiki 1000 that I was using. This stone is soft enough that touches the bevel nice and evenly. So what happens is that this will fogs that softer steel part up quite nicely. You could attain this very similar finish with Naniwa traditional stone, or if you have King 1000 stone, you could do that as well. So now, as you can see, it's much nicer and much even right here. You can start to see the little bit of difference between the core steel right here and the softer steel. In comparison, here is the other side. It's much more polished, and you can't really see that the difference between the core steel and a softer steel. That was it with this 1000 Knifewear 1000 job, because I made the bevel so nice and even, and all it needed was probably 10-15 strokes to make it even. This is Arashiyama 6000 stone. This stone is really nice stone to achieve that nice Kasumi finish. It is a little bit higher grit as a 6000 and a little bit of jump from 1000 grit, but in order to attain that really nice Kasumi polish, you could do from Knifewear 1000 to this Arashiyama 6000. Apply a little bit of water. Great thing about this Arashiyama 6000 is that it's relatively soft stone, so it feels like a rubber. It is a resin-based stone, so it kind of has a little bit more cushiony feel. You could attain the very similar finish with, for example, Kensho K series. As well, you could do it with some Naniwa Superstone series as well. If you want to get the nice foggy so-called Kasumi finish, misty Kasumi finish, is that to use a mud and rub basically on the softer part of the steel and polish a little bit of hard pressure a little bit harder pressure along the edge, bit shorter stroke along the edge to polish it up. So in order to attain the shiny edge part, press a little bit harder along the edge here and bit shorter stroke. Those mud, I will use them a little bit lighter pressure along the bevel, so you can see the very shiny mirror-esque edge along the mirror-esque polish along the edge. Then you get really nice foggy finish on the soft steel. This is very classic Kasumi finish on your knife. If you compare it to the other side, this is got a really nice Kasumi, and this is more Migaki. It's very even, easy to attain. And remember, this does not affect any sharpness of the edge. Mirror polishing, it can be a very long process. In order to attain mirror polish like this, it requires time and an effort. And also you may need some special equipment. This is not the service that we offer, but lots of hobbyists at home like to get into this mirror polishing work. So let's explain how. So there are several ways to attain the mirror polish. Most common way is actually to use these different grits of waterproof sandpapers. So I have finished my bevel with 1000 grit, so you can do 1500 grit, 2000 grit, and 2500 grit sandpaper. Then you can use some buffing polishing compound to finish a mirror polish. Also, you could use one of these stones like Knifewear 8000 or Naniwa Professional 10,000. If you're attempting to achieve a mirror polish with stones, really important thing is to keep your bevel as flat as possible. You could attain the mirror polish with these stones like Knifewear 8000 or Naniwa Professional 10,000. But when you are attempting to get the mirror polish with the stones, make sure you have the bevel as flat as possible. Okay, so I have this Usuba that I've been working on to try to create the mirror polish on the bevel. And I'll show you what that means by the importance of the flatness by putting this knife on this Knifewear 8000 grit. When you are trying to make really nice polish, I will urge you to not to have as much slurry. When you're trying to polish them, the slurry often does a little more fogging it up. So if you're trying to attain the more shinier polish, I would urge you to just you could even work under a running water as well. I wouldn't do it with this particular stone, but there are techniques. So I'm trying to get the towards the mirror polish, but as you can see, there's a little streaks that is showing up on the bevel. This is slight imperfection on the bevel, so I may have to reset it or use some other routes to get this part mirror polish. What I would like though, particular on this Usuba, is to have a tiny bit of convexity. So I would keep this shape and try other methods like using the sandpapers or sandpapers or some other methods like diamond pastes. Properly making a mirror polish by hand takes a lot of time and dedication. If you're up for it, go for it. all by means. It's going to be a great hobby if you have plenty time to kill. So, personally, I usually go for a nice Kasumi finish when I'm sharpening my knives. It looks really gorgeous, but it's fairly straightforward to achieve. Which one do you prefer? You can find all of the stones that I used today linked in the description and at your local knifewear stores. If you'd like to learn more about knife sharpening, check out my technique playlist and let me know in the comments what you'd like to see next. Thanks for watching.